Every tamer bonds the strongest beast they can catch. I rewind the runt they throw away. My own clan called my gift worthless and threw me out as a beast butcher. They branded me the same hour my ruined cast-off beat their prize beast. Rewinding a beast only drags it back to an early molt it already grew past. But a beast wound back to its egg can be raised again down any path it was denied. So the trash they throw out, I grow into apex monsters with no limit. It isn't fast. A rewound beast stays weak for weeks, and every rewind burns through my own strength. The crown beast my clan shows off as its pride, I wound it back from a dying runt before they threw me out. Now I'm walking back into the Ascension Trials to prove it, in front of every clan that laughed. The runt stepped into the ring and the whole crowd went quiet. It was a scrap of a thing. Half the size of the crowned prize across the sand. You could still see its ribs. Someone in the stands laughed, sharp and mean, then stopped. The prize beast lunged first. It should have ended right there. A crowned apex against a beast the boards had stamped worthless. That's no fight. That's the kind of quick end a crowd comes to watch. But the little one wasn't where the blow landed. It slid. Low and quiet, light as air for a breath, and the apex's claws closed on nothing but dirt. Then the scrap was in close, quick as stilled water, and the crowned beast stumbled like the ground had shifted. A woman near the rail dropped her cup. That beast just beat a crowned prize, she said. How? Nobody answered her. Nobody could. The crowned beast tried again. It was bigger, older, bred and trained for exactly this, and it kept hitting a shape that wasn't there anymore. Each miss threw it off balance. Each miss chipped away at the story its owner had paid so much to tell. You could hear it in the crowd, that slow turn from laughing to worried, the sound people make when the thing they came to mock stops being funny. That can't be its real form, a man breathed behind me. It was its real form. That was the whole problem. That was the thing none of them had a word for, because their world has no rank for what I do. I stood at the back where the light didn't reach, hood up, hands folded, and watched a thing everyone in that arena called garbage do something none of their crowns could do. They couldn't explain it. That was the point. That was always the point. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before the ring, before the runt, before I learned to grow apex beasts out of what the world throws in a pit, there was a chalkboard, a word scrawled under my name, and a room full of people I called family deciding what I was worth. Let me take you back to the hour it all came apart. The board readers pressed the grading stone into my palm and waited for it to burn out a rank. I was 21. I had waited my whole life for that stone. Every child raised in the hatch towers waits for it, the day your gift shows itself and the board chalks your name with a rank the whole clan can read. My family stood along the terrace above me. I remember thinking they looked proud. The stone glowed. Then it flickered. Then it went dull. The lead reader frowned at it. Frowned at me. He tried it twice more, and each time the stone couldn't decide what to make of me. Because my gift didn't bond. It didn't command. It didn't do the one thing every tamer's gift is supposed to do. Reach out and take hold of a strong beast and make it yours. Mine reached backward. They called it regress. Wind a beast back to an earlier molt, back toward the egg it hatched from, to the board that meant nothing. You can't rank a gift that won't grab hold of the strong. So the reader shrugged and chalked the only mark a stone that won't burn a rank ever gets. F rank. He wrote it big enough for the terrace to read. F rank, someone above me said, loud enough to carry. That says everything you need to know. The word for it in the towers is worthless. There's no softer way they mean it. An F-rank tamer feeds beasts and cleans yards and is glad to do it, because he's just a mouth the clan chose to keep. I stood in the middle of that ring with the dull stone in my clean palm and felt the terrace above me quietly decide I was a mistake they'd have to house. You have to understand what a rank is, in a place like this. It isn't a number. It's a door. The board grades you, and that grade decides what beasts you're allowed, what yards you eat in, whether your name gets said with pride or with a small sorry shrug. Everything above me, food, standing, a future, ran through that one dull stone, and the stone had said, nothing here. The board readers didn't even look angry. That was the worst of it. They looked embarrassed for me. A gift that runs backward instead of forward is just awkward, a thing the ledger has no column for. Better if it had never shown up at all. I didn't argue. I already knew something they didn't. 3 nights before that stone, I had done the thing they had no rank for. There was a runt in our own yard, a dying scrap the head keeper had marked for the pit, a beast whose first molt had locked it out of every path worth having. It would be ash by morning, everyone agreed. I put my hands on it, and I wound it back, not fused. Not drained. I took nothing out of it. I only carried it backward, whole, breathing, watching me the whole way down, to the egg molts it had already grown past and forgotten. And when its closed-off tree cracked open again, I grew it down a path its kind was never allowed to take. By the second night that dying runt was standing, By the third, it was faster and stranger and stronger than anything in our yard. I didn't tell them how, I only knew what I had. And I made the mistake of thinking that if they saw it, really saw it, the rank on the board wouldn't matter. So when the clan put that same regrown runt against our prize beast to test it, and it outfought the crown, I let myself hope. I should have known better. The clan leader came down from the terrace herself. She was tall and stiff, silver hair coiled high and pinned with a clasp that caught the light, and when she looked at the runt out fighting our prize, her face didn't fill with wonder. "He doesn't tame beasts," she said. Quiet. She never had to raise her voice, the whole yard leaned in to catch it. "He ruins them." That was the moment they branded me. Not with iron, with a word, said by the one person whose word became the clan's truth. Beast Butcher. A meddler who wrecks what the boards already ruled worthless. Because here's the thing about a world that throws its weak in a pit by law, a man who saves the cast-offs doesn't look kind. He looks like someone messing with a ruling everyone already agreed to. She had a choice, standing there. She could have named what I'd done. A dying runt, regrown, out fighting a crown, that's a gift the whole clan could have risen on. Or she could keep the story simple. A prize bloodline was worth more to the clan's standing than an F-rank son with an outlawed gift. She chose the story. I could have shouted. I could have grabbed the runt and made them watch me do it again, right there, until every terrace understood. I felt all of it climb up my throat. I let it go. I stood still and let the yard decide I was nothing. I have thought about that 1,000 times since, and I don't regret it. A man who shouts his innocence hands the room a scene to remember him by. A man who says nothing keeps the one thing they can't grade, what he really is, held back until he chooses where to show it. So, I said nothing, and they threw me out. They walked me to the high gate at dusk. That's how the clan does exile, no ceremony, just a gate and the far side of it. At the gate, the clan leader's second reached up and took the corner of my cloak, the corner where the clan crest was stitched, and tore it clean off. The cloth came away with a small dry sound. Underneath, the wool was a paler green where the crest had shielded it from years of sun. A patch the exact shape of everything I used to be. Coal pit scraps and a torn cloak, someone in the gate crowd said. Some Tamer. I pulled the hood up and walked through. But I looked back once. I shouldn't have. From the gate you can see up into the high yard where the clan keeps its pride, and there, under the crowned beast banner, being led out for the evening parade, was the runt. My runt. The dying scrap I'd wound back to its egg with my own hands 3 nights before the stone. They hadn't put it in the pit after all. Somebody had seen what it became and understood exactly what it was worth. So, they kept it. The golden boy of the clan walked at its side, 18 and glowing, the red and gold sash of a crowned tamer across his chest. Dax. He lifted his chin for the crowd and laid a hand on the beast like it had always been his, like the bond in it had grown toward him. If it hadn't. I could see even from the gate how the creature's head kept turning, searching, restless, reaching for hands that weren't there anymore. They had my rank on their board and my work under their banner. They erased the man and kept the miracle. That's a special kind of theft. They didn't just take a beast. They took the proof. The one living thing that showed the board had graded me wrong, and they hung a banner over it and taught a boy to call it his. Every time that crowd cheered the crown, they were cheering the exact thing they'd branded me for making, and not one of them knew it. I did. I climbed down out of those towers carrying the one fact that could burn the whole crowning story to the ground, and no stage to say it on. A truth nobody will believe is just a heavier thing to carry. I turned around and I walked down toward the market town, and I did not let myself run. The coal pit sits at the low edge of town where the feed lanterns give out. It's where every clan for a day's ride dumps the runts whose first molt locked them out, an approved grave for beasts that can't be crowned. I knew it well. Half my childhood I'd stood at its rail hating it. That night I climbed down into it. There was a scrap near the bottom, curled up small against the cold. A dun mudcur runt, the most common thing in the world, its kind locked out of every strong path the day it hatched. Somebody's cast off, somebody's ruling. It was barely breathing. I knelt in the ash and I put my hands on it. I want to be honest about what this costs, because everyone always wants to hear about the power and no one wants to hear the price. Winding a beast back burns something out of me, my own bond strength, the inner store every tamer's gift draws on. When I rewind a thing, I pour that into carrying it backward and it doesn't come back fast. My palms went cold. Then they burned, fine pale lines opening across both hands like calluses made of light. My knees nearly gave. And the beast went back to its egg mold and stayed there, small and soft and helpless. That's the second half of the truth. A rewound beast is weak for weeks while it grows back. One bad night ends it. I'd made this scrap younger and weaker than the cast-off it already was, and now I had to keep it alive long enough to grow it into something no board could rank. I sat in the pit with it against my chest, and I waited. This is the part the boards will never understand, the part that makes them call it butchery, I hadn't taken anything from the runt. I hadn't fed it to something stronger, hadn't cut a trait loose and stuck it on something else, hadn't drained a drop of it into me. It was whole. It was more itself than it had ever been, carried back to the one moment before its kind got locked, before some old molt slammed every strong door in its face. All I'd done was open the doors again. What it grew into from here was up to how I raised it, and how much of me I was willing to spend. That's the trade nobody wants to hear. The strong tamers reach out and take. I reach back and give, and it's my own store the giving comes out of. Do it too often, do it too big, and there's nothing left in me to protect the weak thing I just made. I'd have to learn that limit the hard way, over and over. Tonight I'd learn the first inch of it, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. It took most of the night. Toward the gray hour before dawn, I felt it stir. The soft new shape uncurled. It found its legs, wobbling, ash falling off a pelt that was no longer done at all. Deep black, so dark it drank the little light there was, with faint blue lines running under it that pulsed slow, like something breathing awake. Molte 1, the first rung. A rewound larva, whole and alive and mine to raise down any path I chose. A dun mudcur on its own locked line ends up small, slow, and pit-bound before its first year is out. That limit is the only thing a mudcur has ever been allowed to reach. This one wasn't on that line anymore. Whatever path I gave it now, it would grow past every door its kind had ever been told was the last one. It looked at me with molten copper eyes. It didn't have to. A beast at this stage owes nobody anything. It could have shied into the dark and I'd have let it. Every single thing in my life up to that hour had chosen against me. The board. The clan leader. The gate. The small black beast took one unsteady step across the ash, toward me. And then it leaned its whole weight into my hands, and stayed. I didn't make a sound. You don't make a show of a thing like that. I just let it lean, and let it be true, the first creature in the world to choose me back. There was an old man at the pit's edge, the keeper. He'd been there long enough to see me climb down, and long enough to see what climbed back up. He looked at the beast in my arms, and his weathered face did something complicated. That runt was ash by nightfall, he said, low. He hatched it. He didn't look away from the beast in my arms. 40 years I've thrown the weak ones down that hole. Watched everyone go quiet. His jaw worked. That's the first I ever saw climb back out. One runt back out of that pit in 40 years. He said it low, like a count he meant to set down somewhere he wouldn't lose it. I didn't answer him. I climbed out of the pit with the beast tucked against the torn patch on my cloak, and I stood at the rail in the first gray light, and I named it in my head the only thing that fit. Sable. Black is the thing the world burned me down to. I looked east. Past the market, past the towers, the great tiered arena sat on the horizon where they crown the apex beasts and decide who matters. The one stage the clans can't rig, because the whole world watches it happen. The Ascension Trials. They kept my crown and called it their bloodline. They kept my work and branded me a butcher for making it. So I was going to rebuild on everything this world throws away. Every runt, every cast-off, every scrap dumped in every pit. And I was going to walk it back into that arena and let them all watch me prove whose garbage the clan's crown. Sable's copper eyes tracked where I was looking, like it already understood. 90 days to the Ascension Trials. The mudcur line locks up at its second molt. I found the exact door where it happens. I had Sable stretched out on a feed sack in the gray light of the hatch yard, and I was reading it the way the headkeepers back home never bothered to read anything they'd already condemned. You can see a beast's whole closed-off tree if you know where to look. The paths it took, and the paths that slammed shut the day its first molt locked. A mudcur's tree is almost all shut doors. That's why they fill the pits. Their line grows heavy and slow and dull, and then it stops, and nothing you do afterward prees it open. Nothing except starting over from the egg. There, I said low, to a beast too young to understand words and old enough to lean toward my voice anyway. My thumb traced the faint blue lines under its black pelt, the ones that had come up out of nowhere in the pit. That's the path they never let you have. Every locked line has one. A path its kind could have walked if some old molt hadn't closed it off. On a mudcur, it's a light-boned path, quick, hollow-boned, built for quiet instead of weight. No mudcur in any record ever reached it, because no mudcur ever got to undo the molt that ruined it. Sable would. That was the whole plan, and the whole cost of the plan. Reading a beast this way is the one skill I've got that the board would have to admit is real, if they ever watch me do it. It isn't guessing. Every locked path leaves a scar at the egg line, a place where the tree tried to grow one way and got forced another. You read the scars backward. You learn which door the line was shoved away from, and you learn, just as important, which doors were never there at all. Pick a path the runt can't actually reach and you don't get a weaker apex, you get nothing. You waste the whole regrowth, weeks of it, and the beast comes out broken and there's no starting over a second time. Choose wrong once and the runt has paid for my mistake with the only life it had left. So I read Sable 3 times before I named the path aloud. Lightboned. Quiet. Reachable. I was as sure as I get. Because, here's what naming the path buys you. Nothing, yet. You don't rewind a beast and get an apex. You get a soft, blind, week-old thing that has to grow the path forward, slow, the way you'd raise any hatchling, except this one can be lost to a hard frost or a stray dog or a bad night. The weak spell doesn't close for weeks. I couldn't rush it. If I fed it wrong, or pushed a path it couldn't actually reach, I'd waste the whole regrowth and be right back at a pit with a scrap in my hands. So I did the thing my gift is really made of, the thing the board has no column for. I waited, and I tended it, and I kept it alive. Day 9, it took its first stride that held. Every morning before that it had tried to walk and buckled, legs folding under a body still relearning its own weight. On the 9th it crossed one length of the feed sack and its legs didn't give. I marked the day in my head the way a keeper marks a ledger. Not a molt, not the path yet, just the first stride that held. I was still too worn out from the pit to rewind even one more cast-off, so I let that one small step be the whole day's work. One beast can't rebuild a name though. I knew that from the first morning. The market's discard line runs along the low wall behind the feed stalls, a slow trickle of what the clans throw out, dropped by keepers who don't want to make the walk to the pit itself. Bad eggs. Locked out runts. Beasts marked ruined and left to whoever's desperate enough to want them, which is nobody. I started walking it at dawn, hood up, sable at my heel, filling my arms with the world's rejects. The market saw me exactly the way you'd expect. Whatever's at his heel belongs in the pit, a bond broker said to his neighbor, loud enough for me. Coal pit scraps, the both of them. I picked through the discard line anyway. Most of what gets dropped there is truly finished, beasts so far down their locked path that even a rewind couldn't give them a door they could reach. You learn to tell fast. A keeper had left a spindle-legged thing shivering against the wall, marked ruined in chalk on its flank, and I crouched and read its tree the way I'd read Sable's. 2 paths still glimmered at the egg line under all the shut ones. It could be regrown. It had a path. I couldn't take it. Not yet. Rewinding it meant spending strength I was already rationing, and a second weak larva meant a second thing to keep alive through the weeks, and I could barely protect the one I had. So I marked the spindle thing in my head, the way you memorize a face you mean to come back for, and I left it shivering. That's a cost too, the one nobody counts. Every runt I can't get to yet is a runt I have to walk past. I didn't correct him. Let the market see a broken F-rank scrounging garbage. The moment they see anything else, the moment they start to wonder what a nobody is doing collecting cast-offs, is the moment the net starts closing. My whole edge is that no one's looking. I gathered my scraps and I kept my head down and I went back to the yard to grow the one that mattered. Sable turned faster than I dared hope. It was maybe 2 weeks into the re-raise. I was fixing a fence line when the yard went wrong quiet, that certain silence a place makes when something in it moves without any sound at all. I turned, and Sable was crossing the packed dirt toward me and its feet weren't touching down, not floating. Nothing so grand. Just weightless for a stride and a half, the black body going soft and quiet, the blue veins pulsing slow under the pelt, and then its paws found the ground again like it had never left. It didn't even seem to notice it had done a thing no mudcur has done in the history of the line. Molt. 2. The new path fledgling. The phase soft step. Quick, hollow-boned, quiet, the exact trait the light-boned path carries and the exact trait its locked line never could. I sat down in the dirt and laughed, once, quietly, which for me is a great deal of noise. Because this was the proof that mattered more than any test corner would. Not that a rewound beast could survive, I already knew that. That a rewound beast could grow into something, its whole kind was denied. The path was real. The limit I'd promised myself back in the pit, no limit, wasn't a fever dream. It was standing in front of me on 4 soft feet, pulsing blue, walking on air. It was beautiful. That was the problem with it. I should have kept it in the yard. I knew even then. But you can't fully grow a trait in a pen. A beast has to use a thing to make it real, and Sable needed ground and distance and other feet moving around it. So I took it into the market at the edge of the day, when the crowd's thin, and I let it move. It went weightless between 2 feed stalls to dodge a hauler's cart, quiet as a held breath, and a knot of market folks saw it happen. The cart would have caught its wheel and gone over. Instead, the black shade flowed under the shaft and out the far side, and the load rolled clean. The stall hand who owned it watched, jaw-working, then dug in his apron and flipped something into the dirt at my feet without quite meaning to. A single copper, dull and thin. For the trick, he muttered, already turning away like paying me had shamed him. I picked it up out of the ash. 1 copper, the first coin the world had ever paid my work. It moved wrong, a woman said. She wasn't mocking. She sounded almost hurt by it. Beautiful, but wrong for its kind. That's the tell. That's the exact thing I have to hide and can't. A regrown beast wears a trait its recorded line can't hold, and anyone who knows beasts sees the seam. Most people don't know beasts. Most people just felt a small strangeness and moved on. One person in that market knew beasts for a living. I didn't see her catch it. That's the part that scares me now, looking back. I never saw her at all. A woman with a long copper braid and a teal scarf, hazel green eyes going still the way a hunter's do when the prey finally steps into the open. She watched Sable dodge the cart. She watched the veins pulse. And she did the one thing nobody in that market had the training to do, she wrote it down. No record holds a path like that, she said to herself, already reaching for a scout's notebook. Rena, though I wouldn't have her named for a while yet. The rival clan paid her to find edges our clan couldn't match, and she'd just found one walking loose in a market town at the heel of a nobody. She started a file that afternoon, the first outsider to start hunting who I was. I'd piece her together later, the way you work out a storm from the damage. The scout read beasts the way I did. Closed off paths, locked molts, the whole hidden build of a creature, because the rival clan paid her to. Her whole living was spotting the edge a clan could buy. And a beast wearing a trait its recorded line can't hold is the single most valuable thing a scout can find, because it means somebody, somewhere, is doing something the boards say is impossible. She didn't have my face. She didn't have my name. She had a black runt that moved wrong and a strangeness she couldn't file under any kind she knew, and she had the patience to stand in a market and wait for it to happen again. A scout's file starts with one line. Hers said, no record holds a path like that. Then she went looking for the second line. I didn't know it. I only knew I needed to prove the thing to something more than a hauler's cart. The test corner sits at the market's north end, an open square where lesser tamers put their beasts up for coin and standing, low stakes, unranked, the kind of place nobody important watches. A mid-tamer there had a kept beast he was proud of, a proper bonded creature raised up the ordinary way, and he was taking all comers for a purse. I put Sable in against it. I want to be careful how I tell this, because it matters. I did not command Sable. That's not what I do, that's the whole difference the board couldn't grade. A strong tamer stands at the rail and steers his beast like a hand steering a tool. I stood at the rail and did nothing. I trusted the path I'd regrown. The win, if it came, would be the beast's, not mine. The mid-tamer looked at Sable and nearly gave me my coin back out of pity. That's culprit stock, he said. This spring, by the look. You sure? I'm sure, I said. It was the most I'd spoken aloud in days. The kept beast came in heavy and sure, the way a bonded creature does when it's been told it can't lose. Sable wasn't there. It went weightless under the first rush, quiet, and slid inside. And where the kept beast expected weight, it found nothing to push against, and where it expected slow, it found a thing already gone. Round after round it swung at a shape that had already moved. A locked-out runt, half its size, out of the pit this very spring, and it was making a proud kept beast look like it was fighting the wind. The kept beast wasn't weak. That's what the corner couldn't get past. It was a good, honest, bonded creature doing everything it had been raised to do, and it simply had no answer for a trait its whole world said couldn't exist on a thing that size. It kept resetting, kept throwing its weight and force, and Sable kept turning solid ground into open air a half-breath before contact. You could watch the mid-tamer's certainty drain out through his hands where he gripped the rail. He started calling commands faster, louder, the way you do when the plan is failing and you don't have another one. I called nothing. I never once moved from the rail. The test corner crowd went from jeering to silent to something worse than silent. A locked-out runt does not do that, the mid-tamer said. He wasn't even angry. He was looking at his own beast like it had lied to him. I felt it land in me, quiet and huge, the first real crack of proof that the board was wrong. My worthless gift had just beaten a kept beast in the open. I didn't cheer. I didn't so much as change my face. Playing it small is the only armor I got left. I collected Sable, and I felt the win like a coal held in a closed fist, private, hot, mine. Nobody watching knew my name. That was the win and the whole plan of it. Prove it, and don't be seen proving it. Far off, in a high yard I couldn't see, something I'd made was starting to notice me. I'd hear about it later, but I know how it went, because I know that beast better than the boy who wears its crown. On the clan's right ground, the crowned apex stood for the evening parade, the way it always did, and for no reason the boy could name. It went restless. It turned its ridge-crowned head and searched the horizon, straining towards something too far to see. The gold beast and my little black one carry the same maker's mark under their skin, the same slow blue pulse, and when one of mine grows a rung, some thread I don't understand pulls tight in the other. The golden boy laid a hand on it and smiled for the crowd, and felt, for the first time, a small cold unease he had no words for. His beast was reaching for hands that weren't his. He played the bond up harder to cover it. He didn't know why he had to. I didn't get to enjoy any of it, because the cost came for me that same night. I got Sable back to the yard, and my legs went out from under me at the gate. The rewind, the weeks of tending, and then the drain of that show on top of it. It emptied me. My hands wouldn't close all the way. The scar lines across both palms ached like a low tide of fire. This is the limit, and it never moves. I can only spend so much of myself before there's nothing left to protect the weak things I've made. A drained tamer is a tamer who loses a larva in the night. I couldn't rewind another beast if the whole discard line lined up in front of me. I could barely stand. Sable pressed close and I felt it thrum, that faint blue pulse running warm under the black, and I understood the other half of the cost. It wasn't only that the show had drained me. It was that Sable itself was still weak, a Molt 2 fledgling that had spent everything it had in that corner and now needed weeks of quiet to lock in the path. I had shown the world a beautiful, impossible move, and in doing it I'd made both of us breakable at the same hour. That's the pattern I'd be living inside from here on. The proof and the weakness come out of the same well. So I sat in the dark of the hatchyard with Sable curled against my chest, and I counted, not coins. Wes. One quiet win, and I could already feel the net stir, a strangeness the market would talk about, a scout I hadn't seen writing in a book, a restlessness 100 miles away in a beast that used to be mine. Every proof buys me a step forward and a step closer to being found. That's the trade, and it doesn't get cheaper. I had one beast at Molt 2 and a yard full of scraps I was too spent to touch. 90 days had become 78. And a single win had bought me more watchers than I could afford. The spindle-legged runt I'd walked past was still out there on the discard line, waiting for a night I had the strength to spare. So was the next one, and the one after that. I needed more beasts. I needed a base no one could find. And I needed to be strong enough to make either of those true, before someone put a name to the nobody in the market who grows apex out of garbage. 78 days to the Ascension Trials. The win had bought me eyes, so the first thing I bought back was a place with no eyes in it. There's an abandoned hatchyard, a half-hour out past the last feed lantern, where some failed bondbroker went broke and left the pens to rot. Nobody goes there, that's its whole value. Stone pens, a cracked cistern, a roof that mostly holds, and walls high enough that whatever grows inside them grows unseen. I moved Sable out there under cover of the gray hour, and I started making it into what I needed, not a home. A grow site. A place to raise the world's rejects where the world couldn't come and look. Hiding stops being a habit and becomes the whole job the moment one person starts to wonder. I'd felt that person wondering in the market. So I dug a blind at the yard's mouth, and I learned which paths in left no track, and I taught myself to come and go like a man with nothing worth following. If I was going to build a menagerie of impossible beasts, the first thing I had to grow was invisibility. It's strange work, hiding a thing you're proud of. Every apex I ever raise, I raise to be seen. That's the whole point of the arena at the end of all this. But between the making and the showing, there's a long dark stretch where being seen means being stopped, and I was going to have to live in that stretch for months. So, I built the grow site like a secret, and I told myself it was temporary. A man can stand almost anything if he believes it ends. Sable settled into the stone pens like it had been born there, prowling the walls at dusk, testing the phase soft step against the shadows, and for the first time since the gate, I had walls that were mine and no one else's to tear a crest from. The supply was the harder problem. I couldn't keep picking the open discard line. A man who scrounges cast-offs every dawn gets remembered. I needed a source that didn't talk. I found one at the coal pit itself. Or rather, he found me. The pit has a keeper, an old man in a rust-brown leather apron worn shiny at the pockets, iron-gray hair cropped close over a high brow, weathered ruddy skin, plain brown eyes that had watched more runts go into that pit than any man alive should have to. He smelled of feed and ash. He moved slow and stooped, like the job had folded him. Bram, the market called him when it bothered to call him anything, the old keeper of the place where beasts go to be forgotten. He'd seen me climb down the night I made Sable. He'd said the one thing, that runt was ash by nightfall, he hatched it, and then he'd said nothing to anyone, which I only understood later was a kind of mercy. I came to the pit before dawn one morning meaning to take a cast-off quiet, and he was standing there waiting, a marked runt cradled in the crook of his arm. I stopped. I got ready to be caught. He held the runt out to me instead. "Take it," he said. His voice was slow and low and rough with disuse. It was ash by morning anyway. I didn't move for a second. In the world I come from, a keeper who catches a beast butcher stealing from the pit reports him and collects the thanks. That's how the whole place works. A man doesn't hand you the thing he's paid to destroy. "Why?" I said, not really a question. "I don't waste breath." He looked at the runt, not at me. 40 years I've thrown the weak ones in that hole, he said, on orders. Every time. There was one, a long while back, I'd have sworn could have lived. The clan leader said, "Pit it." I pitted it. He worked his jaw. Never forgave myself the once. Not going to spend what's left of me forgiving myself 1,000 times over for the ones I could have handed to a man who does something else with them. That's an alliance. Not a handshake, a wound offered across a pit rail from one man who'd been made small by the machine to another. He wanted to see one cast off, just one, prove the board wrong before his time ran out. I was the only chance he'd ever get at it. Dawn, I said, I'll come at dawn. They marked the pit list the night before, he said. I'll know which ones before you do. Come at dawn, and I'll look the other way. A pause. You be careful, who else is looking? I took the runt. It changed everything about what I could build, and it put a good old man's only livelihood in my scarred hands. I didn't say thank you, he'd have hated it. I just took the beast and went, and from that morning the discards came to me quiet, at the gray hour, one hand to another over a pit rail. I want to be honest about what that gift cost him, because he never once said it aloud. The keeper's post was the only thing the old man had. It let him eat, and more than that, it let him be the one who eased the discards. A small mercy in a place with no mercy in it, the difference between a runt-pitted rough and a runt-pitted gentle. If the clan ever caught him slipping cast-offs to a branded beast butcher, they'd take the post, and there'd be no gentleness left in that pit at all. He knew that. He handed me the runt anyway. The first person to look at my garbage work and quietly bless it, and he risked the last thing he owned to do it. When the world hasn't given you permission to root for yourself, one old man's rusted apron blessing is worth more than a rank. Back at the grow site, I did the work, and the work taught me its own limit again. I rewound 2 of the cast-offs the old keeper slipped me. 2, and no more, because 2 nearly emptied me. Each rewind burns the same store, and there's a floor under it. I can't cross without leaving myself too spent to protect a single one of them through the night. I'd learned that lesson worn out on a pit floor, and I learned it again in the grow yard. I cannot stockpile. The menagerie can only grow as fast as I can pour myself into it and recovery takes days I don't have many of. A man with no ceiling and a shallow well fills his cup one slow inch at a time. But it fills. By the end of that stretch, the grow site held 3, sable, ahead of the others, and 2 soft new larvae at molt 1, blind and breathing and beginning. I told the old keeper the count at the next dawn handoff, because he'd earned the knowing. He leaned on the pit rail and worked it out slow on his fingers. 3, he said. 3 now, where 3 boards marked 3 for the pit. The word came out of him careful, like he was afraid of shaking it loose. 40 years he'd fed that pit and watched the chalk come out right every single time, and now here I was, telling him the chalk had been wrong 3 times over. I watched the pride of it wake something behind his plain brown eyes, and then he looked away, because neither of us was any good at being looked at. The first was that thin-legged thing I'd had to walk past on the throwaway line. I went back for it the way I'd promised myself, and it was still there, still shivering, and when I wound it back to its egg, its 2 shining branches sat exactly where I'd read them. The second was a lump of a beast. The old keeper slipped me at dawn, a scaled thing so squat and sour-tempered the clans had marked it, ruined before it even opened its eyes. Both came back soft and blind, and mine to raise, and neither of them looked like anything yet. That's the truth of a beast den at this stage. It doesn't look like an army. It looks like a nursery full of things the world already gave up on, breathing in the dark. A den of the world's cast-offs, each one carried down a branch. Its kind was never allowed, tended by the man everyone agreed. Ruin's beasts. I stood in the middle of it in the lantern dark and felt something I didn't have a clean word for. Not pride. Something quieter and more stubborn than pride. Every one of these had been marked for the pit, once. Ruined, pitted. And every one of them was going to walk into the light someday and make a liar of the chalk mark on its side. The rumor found me before I was ready for it. I heard my own legend before I even had one, which is a strange thing. I was moving through the market with my hood up, and I caught it drifting off a cluster of traders by the egg stalls. A story, already worn smooth by retelling, about a tamer who brings junk beasts back to life. Who takes the pit's garbage and grows it into things that shouldn't be. Half of them thought it was nonsense. It's a trick, one trader said, flat. Has to be a trick. You can't grow a top beast out of a mud runt. Nobody can. Then explain the black one at the test corner, said another. I can't. That's my point. So it's a trick. That's how the truth travels in a place that can't afford it to be true. They'd rather call it a trick than call the whole board a liar. But a story was loose now, and stories don't need my name to keep spreading. They just need a shape, and this one had a good one, a nobody who raises the dead-ended. Every time it got told, the net drew a finger tighter. There was a betting board propped at the egg stalls where the traders laid coin on the season's rights. Crowns favored, always, the big money against anything the pits coughed up. That week, the chalk had moved. A bookmaker was arguing it with 2 others, jabbing his stub of chalk at the line. Crowns against surprises. The odds moved a whole step this week, he said, sour, and I'll tell you why. That black thing at the test corner, he didn't have my name. He'd just put a price on my work, on a public board I'd never once touched, and moved it a full step on nothing but a story. I kept my hood down and stood in the crowd and watched a number move because of me, and the scout was pulling that finger. I nearly walked into her. That's the closest I've come to undone, and I didn't even see it until it had almost happened. I turned a corner between the feed stalls, and there she was. Copper braid, teal scarf, hazel green eyes moving over the crowd, the way mine move over a beast, reading everyone, missing nothing. The scout, though I still didn't have her name. She was showing a stallkeeper a sketch. A black runt with blue lines under its pelt. Someone regrew that, I heard her say, low and certain, to the keeper who was shaking his head. From nothing. I've filed 40 beasts and I've never filed a branch like it. I want the tamer, not the tail. I turned back the way I'd come before her eyes finished their sweep. Slow. In no rush. A man with nothing to hide is in no rush. My heart was going hard enough that I could feel it in the scar lines on my palms. She hadn't placed my face. But she'd placed my work, and she was one honest stallkeeper away from placing me. I got out clean. I always get out clean. The trouble is that clean gets harder every single time. I thought about her the whole way back to the grow site. She wasn't like the traders who called it a trick. The traders wanted it to be false so their world could stay standing. She wanted it to be true. She'd staked her hunt on it being true. Because a real one is worth more to a scout than 100 easy lies. That made her the most dangerous kind of watcher I had, not an enemy who'd wave me off. A believer who'd chase me down to be sure. I couldn't outhide someone who already knew the thing she was hiding from was real. I could only stay a step ahead, and hope the gap didn't close faster than I could stretch my stride. Far off, the beast I'd made without meaning to was making trouble of its own. On the clan's right ground, the crown beast went restless again. Worse this time, they say. The rumor of a junk beast tamer had climbed even to the towers, a market joke beneath the beast mistress's notice, except that the crowned beast chose that same week to strain and search and fail to settle for the crowd. The golden boy stood beside it in his red and gold sash and worked the bond harder than he ever had, hand flat to its plated shoulder. Chin up. The wide, easy smile of a boy who has never been asked to prove the thing he's famous for. Underneath the smile he was cold with a dread he couldn't name. The beast wasn't answering him the way it used to. It was answering something else, some pull from the direction of a market town where its maker was raising its smaller kin. He didn't know that. He only knew the crown he wore was starting to feel like it belonged to somebody who wasn't in the yard. He worked harder to bury the feeling. The feeling didn't bury. I did the opposite of push, that whole stretch, and it was the hardest thing I did, because I could have rushed. With 3 beasts and a rumor already running, the pull was to force a rung, put the knot fast, make the legend real before the net closed. And every gut feeling that had ever served me in that clan screamed to go faster. I didn't. This is the part of my gift that isn't a gift at all. It's just patience. The one thing 40 years of a pit keeper and 21 years of an exile had beaten into me. A larva rushed is a larva wasted. The branch has to grow forward in its own time. There is no molt you can skip, no shortcut that isn't a grave. So I sat with my fragile ones through the cold weeks, and I fed them right and I let them be slow. The board would have called it doing nothing. It was the only thing keeping any of it alive. There's a lie the towers tell about tamers, that the great ones are the ones who push a beast furthest, fastest, hardest. I've come to think the opposite. Any fool with a strong bond can push a kept beast up a ladder that was already built for it. It takes something else to sit in the cold with a blind, breakable thing that the whole world has already buried, and give it week after week after week with no crowd, no proof it'll ever amount to anything, just because you read a door in it that no one else can see. I fed the thin-legged one by hand when it wouldn't take the trough. I sat up 2 nights running with the sour-scaled one when a chill got into the pens. Nobody was watching. That was the point. The making is done in the dark, and only the showing is done in the light, and a man who can't stand the dark part never gets to the light. The sour-scaled one paid that patience back on the second of those cold nights. It was the sourest of the 3, all plated shoulders and refusal, and I'd half feared its new branch was too heavy a thing to ask of a body that squat. Then, shivering in the lantern light, it set its weight down on the light-armored branch for the first time. A slow-plated shudder, legs bracing, and it kept its feet. Held the branch 2 nights running, the first of the 3 after Sable to take a shock and keep its footing. The old keeper had walked out to sit the cold watch with me, the once, and he leaned in and steadied the thing with one broad hand, though it didn't need him to. The 2 nights cost me sleep I couldn't spare, and left my well thinner than I liked. It was worth it. While I held still, the beast mistress did the opposite of holding still. I heard how it went, and I could have drawn it with my eyes closed, because I know exactly how she works. Every right the clan won without trouble told her the erasure had been clean, so she grew bold. She made the crowning parade bigger, more banners, more galleries thrown open, the crown beast walked out longer and prouder before bigger crowds. The safer she felt, the more of the clan's whole standing she staked on that one crowned beast being exactly what she said it was. She has never understood that the wider you stage a lie, the further it has to fall. She thought she was building a monument. She was building the height I'd drop her from. I didn't know the shape of that yet. I only knew the parade was getting louder while I got quieter, and that the distance between us was closing on a single stage. Then the stage announced itself. I saw the bill pinned up in the market at dusk, a bigger local right, ranked higher than the test corner, open to any tamer with a beast to field. Real galleries, real watchers. The exact size of stage a man needs if he means to prove his work to more than a handful of traders. And the exact size of light I'd spent every waking hour learning to stay out of. A chance and a risk in one breath, printed on a scrap of paper flapping in the lantern wind. Sable at my heel, 3 beasts in a hidden yard, a scout with a sketch of my work and an old man risking his post to feed me, and the beast mistress widening her parade a day's ride away. I stood in the dusk and read the bill twice. Everything in me that had learned to hide said walk away. Everything in me that had knelt in a pit and promised to prove it said, this is how you start. A ranked right was a step toward the arena, and a step toward the light I'd been swallowing myself to avoid. You cannot prove a thing to a world that isn't looking. Sooner or later I was going to have to let it look. 60 days to the Ascension Trials. The scout laid every strange beast in the region out on one table and found the same hand on all of them. I wasn't there to see it. I've put it together since, the way you piece a thing together from what it did to you afterward, and I know how her file grew because I read beasts the exact same way she does. The scout had a board at her rival clan post, a plank wall she pinned her finds to, and by then it was crowded. A black runt that walked on air. A test corner beast 3 towns over that shouldn't have held. A market rumor with a shape. Loose pieces a lesser scout would have filed as 3 unrelated freaks. She saw the thread. Under every one of them, when she looked close at the sketches the stall keepers gave her, there was a fine blue line. The same faint vein mark, pulsing in the same slow way, laid into creatures whose recorded lines had no business carrying it. A maker's mark. She didn't know it was a maker's mark. She didn't know a maker existed, but she knew a signature when she saw one repeated. Same hand made all of these, she said, to the empty post. And a scout who can say that sentence out loud is a scout who has stopped hunting a rumor and started hunting a person. Then she did the thing that would eventually reach all the way up to the beast mistress's certainty and crack it. She had old notices at the post, years of them, the ranking board's records of graded and thrown away beasts, because a scout's whole trade is knowing what got tossed and what it was worth. She started matching her blue signature against them. Most were dead ends. She hauled the crate of them out from under the plank wall herself, knees in the dust of the back room, and went through the brittle stacks page by page, blowing years of grit off the ink before she could even read the grading marks. Twice she had to carry a whole armful of notices closer to the one lamp that still worked, holding each sheet up to the light and running a fingertip down the description column, hunting one faint blue thread in 100 pages of dead paperwork. Her hands came away gray with old dust. She didn't stop for it. But one graded ruined seasons ago, a runt some clan had chalked and pitted before it ever mattered, carried a ghost of the same mark under a description no one had thought worth keeping. She didn't understand what she'd found. She only knew that a beast the board swore was garbage, long gone from the record, wore the same signature as the impossible ones walking loose now. She flagged it and moved on. But before she did, she stood back from the plank wall and counted what she had out loud, the way scouts do to make a thing real. 4 beasts, 1 mark, one of them long gone from the record. 4, she said to the empty post. 1 hand. And one of you they bury before I ever came to this post. She didn't know what the count meant. She only knew a count that clean doesn't happen by accident, and she wrote the number down. She had no idea she'd just laid the first stone of a path that ran straight into the clan's crown. Neither did I, yet. But the crack was in the wall now, and cracks only ever run one direction. Here is the thing about the scout that made her more dangerous than the whole assembly put together. She wasn't doing it for them. She was doing it for herself. Her whole life her finds had been credited to the clan. Born above her, she'd hand up a real edge and watch someone with a better name pin it to their own chest. She knew exactly what erased work felt like, because she'd been erased her whole career. So when she caught the scent of a maker no one else could see, she didn't run to her own clan with it. She held it close. This one was going to be hers. The discovery that finally made a clan unable to ignore her, and a scout who's found the work of her life doesn't stop until she has a name to put on it. Her hunger was the net drawing tight around me. And the strange, tangled truth I wouldn't understand for a long while was that the same hunger, aimed a little differently, was the only thing that might ever protect me. While she built her file, I built the thing that would fill it. Back at the grow site, I had a new cast-off to commit. One, the old keeper had slipped me the week before, a lanky beast with more shut doors than most. I read it 3 times, the way I always do now. Reading is the whole difference between a regrowth and a grave. A beast has branches it can actually reach, and branches that only look reachable, ghost doors the eye wants to believe in, and if you commit a runt down a branch its body can't grow into, you don't get a lesser beast. You get weeks of your own vitality poured into nothing, and a creature crippled worse than the pit ever left it. You've got one real door, I told it, low, tracing the egg line. One. If I read you wrong, I waste you. So I'm not going to read you wrong. I said the risk out loud because I owed the beast the truth. It couldn't understand the words. It understood the tone, which was the tone of a man promising not to be careless with the only life it had left. Then I committed it, and paid the vitality, and set myself to the weeks. The fragility window opened the way it always does. The committed beast, soft and breakable now, right when I most needed it whole for a right that was coming. That's the trap of my whole method, and it never loosens. To field a beast at a right, I have to make it fragile first. The stronger the thing I'm reaching for, the longer the window it spends able to be lost. I was going to walk into a ranked right with a beast still inside that window. There was no way to do it that wasn't a gamble. I ran the numbers, the way I run everything, cold, out loud, to a beast that couldn't judge me for it. If I committed the lanky castoff now, it would grow just far enough by the right to hold a ring, but not far enough to be safe. If I waited for safe, I missed the right entirely, and the right was the step toward the arena, and the arena was the whole point. Every path forward asked me to field something breakable. The board would say that made me reckless. The board has never had to grow its worth out of garbage against a countdown. When the only supply you have is the discarded, and the only stage that counts has a date on it, you learn to walk beasts across their fragility windows and pray the window holds one more day. It's not recklessness, it's plain math done by a man with no slack. I ran the lanky castoff through its first real motion that same evening, nothing more than a walk down the length of the yard, testing whether the new branch would hold weight at all, when a stray dog got through a gap in the fence and went straight for it, teeth first, before I could put a body between them. I didn't have time to think, only to move. I put myself between the dog and the still soft castoff and took the bite across my forearm instead, hard enough to tear cloth, and drove the dog off with nothing but noise and a swung feed bucket. The castoff never fell. It flinched, held its new stance, and stayed upright through the whole ugly 10 seconds of it. The first real proof, small and private, that the branch I'd read into it could take a shock and not break. 10 ugly seconds, and it never once went down. That was the number I carried out of the yard, counted like a ledger line no board would ever record. The branch takes a hit and holds. My arm bled through the sleeve the rest of the night. Worth it and cheap next to what a torn regrowth would have cost. There was a smaller sign that same week, in a feed lane, and I caught it only because I was watching for exactly that kind of thing. Sable was at my heel when a junior clan tamer came through with a kept beast on a bond rein, an ordinary graded thing, twice her weight, bred to a proper branch. It got one look at Sable's phase soft trait, the way she stood wrong for her size, and it balked, gave ground. A kept beast, twice the weight, backing off a runt it couldn't read. 2 market hands muttered over it, a clan beast giving way to that? And the junior tamer hauled his off red-faced and never looked back. It was the first time I watched a bonded, board-graded beast lose face to my work in the open. It would not be the last. The system started to circle me while I gambled. Up to then it had only been market traders and one scout. But a rumor that grows loud enough climbs, and it climbed to the assembly, the body that grades and crowns and decides which gifts are allowed to be real. An official came down to the market. I saw him at the edge of the market, a man in assembly gray with a ledger and a frown, asking after an outlawed trait, showing up on beasts that had no right to it. I want to be clear about what that word means from them. Outlawed doesn't mean fake. They knew by now it wasn't fake, that was the trouble. Outlawed means real, and against the rules, and a threat to the story we all agreed to. The assembly doesn't crown truth. It crowns order. A beast wearing a branch no record allows is a hole in the order, and the official had come to find the hole and stop it before anyone else noticed the wall was cracked. That frown was the whole system turning its head toward me for the first time. It would not turn away again. I watched him from across the market and I understood the shape of the whole thing at last. It wasn't going to be one enemy. It was going to be layers of them, each bigger than the last, and each one turning toward me the moment my proof got loud enough to reach it. The clan had thrown me out. The market mocked me. Now the assembly frowned. And somewhere above even the assembly, I knew, sat a body that hunted men who did exactly what I did, though I hadn't drawn its eye yet, and I meant to keep it that way as long as I could. Every rung up the ladder bought a bigger watcher. I had known that in my head since the pit. Watching the gray official write in his ledger, I understood it in my gut. There was no version of proving my worth that didn't also, step by step, walk me toward the people built to stop me. Then the net nearly closed on my own hands. I was moving through the market, hood up, and I reached across a feed stall for a sack, and I didn't feel her at my shoulder until it was almost too late. The scout. The braid, the teal scarf, the eyes already halfway through reading me before I knew she was there. Her gaze dropped to my hands. I had them out in the open, both palms up, reaching, and across both of them ran the fine pale scar lines, the burn cost of every rewind, laid into the skin like calluses made of light. To anyone else, a worker's scarred hands. To a scout who had spent weeks hunting a maker and had just learned that maker paid some price in his own body for his work, they were the tell. For one held breath, her whole face sharpened, the hunter's stillness dropping over it, the same look she'd worn watching Sable slip the cart. I closed my hands and pulled the sack and turned, in no rush, a tired man with nothing to hide, and I walked. I didn't look back. Looking back is what the guilty do. Behind me I felt her stand there a moment too long, holding a piece she couldn't quite fit, scarred hands, a hooded nobody, a signature she couldn't yet stick to a face. She didn't place me, that day. But she logged the scars, I could feel her log them. The cost I pay to make the beasts is written on the only part of me I can't cover, and the one person hunting me had just seen the ink. That's the cruelty of how my gift charges me. A fire tamer's gift leaves no mark. A bond tamer's leaves no mark. Mine writes itself into my hands, every single rewind, pale line over pale line, because the world made sure the one gift that saves the discarded would be the one that can't be hidden. I could change my cloak, I could keep to the dark. I could never once command a beast in the open. But I would always, at the end of it, have to reach for something with two scarred palms, and the closer anyone looked, the more of my whole story they'd read right off my skin. The scout had looked, she'd read a line of it. She just didn't have the rest of the page yet. The old keeper saw my face when I came to the pit that dawn, and he knew. "You've been seen now," he said, low, pressing a marked runt into my arms. His plain brown eyes went over the market behind me, checking it the way he'd taught me to. Move careful. There's an assemblyman asking, and there's the scarf girl asking, and they haven't found each other yet. Pray they don't. The day they trade notes is the day you run out of dark to stand in. I know, I said. Knowing's not careful. He held the beast a beat longer than he had to. I've spent 40 years watching this place eat men slower than you. Don't let it have you fast. That's an alliance too. Not just the cast-offs, the warnings, the eyes he kept on the market when mine were on the beasts, the risk he ran a little deeper every dawn. I took the runt and I moved careful, and the net kept tightening anyway, because a man growing louder proof cannot also grow quieter. Those two pull against each other, and there's no slack left in either. Far off, the beast I'd made was straining toward me hard enough that a whole right ground felt it. The crown beast went restless again on the clan's sand, out in the open this time, in front of the galleries. It turned its ridge-crowned head and searched, and it strained against the boy at its side, its whole great gold body leaning toward some pull no one else could see. The crowd murmured. Something's off about the crown beast, they said, low, uneasy. Beasts don't do that, not the crowned ones. Not the sure ones. I knew what it was reaching for. It was reaching for the hands that had wound it back and grown it and given it once, before a clan took it and hung a banner over it. The same hands that were raising its smaller kin a day's ride off. The beast remembered its maker even when the maker was too far to see, and every rung I climbed pulled the thread tighter. Only I and the audience of my own life knew why the crown couldn't settle. To everyone in those galleries it was just a wrongness they'd talk about at supper. But one person in those galleries had started reading the old notices. The beast mistress was there, high in the clan's box, calm as ever, until a right notice reached her hand. Some clerk's note about a nameless tamer whose trash beasts kept out fighting kept ones, and one detail in it, a molt signature named in passing, a faint blue vein mark. She read it, and for the first time in a long while, the beast mistress, Sabrine, felt something shift under her certainty, not knowledge. Not yet. Just a flicker. A cold thread of unease that snagged on some memory she'd buried, a runt she'd sworn was ruined, a son she'd sworn was gone. She refused to look at it straight. She set the notice down, turned back to her parade, and made her face smooth again. But the flicker was there. The wall had taken its first hairline crack, high up where she'd thought it was solid. She told herself it was nothing. People who have staked everything on a lie always tell themselves the first crack is nothing. The flicker never fully went out again. I didn't see any of that. I only knew what I'd built and what was closing on it. A scout with my scars logged and his signature matched to one hand. A gray official frowning at a hole in his order, a crown straining toward me across a day's ride. And the beast mistress with her first bad dream, though I wouldn't learn that for months. And all of it, every thread, every watcher, every crack, now pointed at one open stage I'd committed a still fragile beast to walk across. The public right loomed on the calendar like a door I'd already stepped through and couldn't unstep. My committed beast still soft in the grow yard, weeks from safe. A scout with my scars in her book. A gray official with his frown. And a crown a day's ride off, leaning toward me harder every week, telling the beast mistress a truth she wouldn't yet let herself hear. Everything I'd built now pointed at one open stage. And I was going to have to walk out onto it in the light, with a fragile thing at my heel, and let all of them look. 45 days to the Ascension Trials. I walked my cast-off into the light for the first time, and the whole right ground laughed before it started. The right opened at midday under a hard sky. Real galleries this time, ranked seats, a proper crowned prize fielded by a mid-clan that had come for standing and coin. And across the sand from all of it, me, hood down for once because a hood draws more eyes than a plain tired face, and the lanky beast I'd committed weeks ago, grown now to the edge of right grade. Molt 3. A thing every soul in those galleries read as pit trash the second it stepped onto the sand. Nobody knew my name, that was still the whole design. Prove it in the open, and stay a nobody while I did. A nameless tamer's win belongs to the work, not to a face they can hunt. Cull pit stock, the mid-clan's tamer said, loud for his gallery. You're wasting my beast's afternoon. I didn't answer. I never do. I set my beast on the line and I stepped back to the rail and I put my scarred hands behind me where no one could read them. The crowned prize came in first, sure and heavy. My cast-off held. That was all it did in the first rounds. It held. It shouldn't have been able to. A dead-ended runt does not stand against a crowned prize. That's not modesty. It's the law of the place, written on every board in every town. But the branch I'd grown into it was a real branch, reachable, chosen right, and it gave the beast an answer for the prize's weight that no one in the galleries had ever seen a runt carry. Round after round the crown pressed, and my cast-off turned to the pressure and did not break. The gallery's laugh died in its throat. Watch it again, a man said, half rising. Tell me what I just saw. Nobody could tell him. They watched it again. It happened again. A murmur ran the tears, that low, uneasy sound a crowd makes when the thing they came to mock refuses to be mocked. Then the prize stopped playing and pressed for real. This is the part I dread every time, the part the board would never believe is hard. The crowned prize came in with everything, a fast, brutal sequence. Its tamer barked out command by command, and my beast was alone out there. Because I don't command, I can't. That's the whole difference that got me graded worthless. I have no bond reins to pull, no voice. The beast answers to like a hand on a tool. In the ring I stand still and I trust the branch. If I read the beast right, the trait carries it. If I read it wrong, it falls out there under a crown and there's nothing I can do but watch. So I stood still. Hands behind my back, face like a shut door. And I trusted the thing I'd grown in the dark. The prize drove in for the finish. My cast-off wasn't where the finish landed. It turned the crown's own weight against it, exactly the way the branch was built to. And where the prize expected a runt to fold, it found a beast that had answered every question it asked and was still standing to ask one back. Then it beat it. Not by luck. Not by a trick. Cleanly, in the open, in front of ranked galleries and the mid-clan's own gaping tamer. The pit trash cast-off took the crowned prize apart move by move and left it turning in circles on the sand, beaten by a thing the board had chalked, ruined this very season. The right ground went silent. Then it erupted. I felt the wind land in me the way I always do. Quiet, huge, a coal in a closed fist. I did not lift a hand. I did not change my face. Playing it small is the only armor I own, and I had never needed it more than in the second. A whole gallery turned to stare at the nobody whose garbage had just made a liar of their law. If that stands, a voice cried out over the roar. An assembly clerk, high in the ranked seats, and he sounded almost afraid. Then every crown we've ever handed out is a lie we told ourselves. That's the sentence I'd been building toward since the pit. That's the whole engine of it, said out loud by one of their own. Because it is real, and it does mean that. Every crown in their world sits on the belief that strength is bred and ranked and can't be grown from garbage. I had just grown it from garbage in front of them. If the runt was real, the whole ladder was a story. The crowd caught the danger of the thought and ran the other way with it, the way crowds do. Where did a nobody grow a top beast? Someone shouted. Who is he? Whose is that beast? The legend jumped a whole size in a single afternoon. Not my name, I still had that. Just the shape of me, bigger and louder now, a tamer who fields the pit's rejects and beats crowned prizes with them. The exact story I needed the world to know, and the exact story that would end me if it ever found my face. High in the ranked stands, one face wasn't cheering or shouting, it was still, and certain, and reading me. The scout, she hadn't watched the beast. She'd watched me, the man at the rail who never moved, never commanded, never lifted a hand, and won anyway. That's a tell too, maybe the biggest one. A tamer who doesn't command is a tamer whose whole gift is something other than the bond. She had scarred hands in her book, a signature on a wall, and now a man who wins without a word, and she was fitting them together behind those hazel green eyes. Someone regrew that, she said, low, to no one, from nothing, a breath. I want his name. Whatever it costs my clan, whatever it costs me, I want his name. I felt her wanting it from across the ground. The net had a face pressed right up against it now. And then, before the roar had even settled, the machine moved to erase me. I should have seen it coming. It's the oldest reflex the towers have. Up at the ranking board, where a clerk chalks the right's results for the whole ground to read, an order came down, quiet, fast, from a box wearing the clan's crimson. Strike it. Grade the beast down. Record the win as outlawed. A banned gift, a trait no line should carry, a result the board would not accept. The beast mistress was at that right. Of course she was. Not for me, she didn't know it was me. For a market joke grown loud enough to reach the towers, a nameless tamer whose junk beasts kept outfighting crowns, and the story cracking her calm certainty a little wider each week. She didn't need to know my face to know the danger. A beast that beats a crown by an outlawed branch is a hole in the order she rules, and she does what she has always done with holes in the order. She buries them. By the order of the board and the weight of the clan behind it, my win was struck. The clerk wiped the chalk. The record would say the runt lost, or never fought, or fought outside the rules and didn't count. The crowd that had just roared would be told, by dusk, that they hadn't seen what they'd seen. This is the part they don't put in the stories about revenge. You can win, cleanly, plain as day, in front of 1,000 eyes, and if the people who own the chalk decide it didn't happen, then, to the record, it didn't. I had proved it a second time and been erased a second time, in the same hour, on a bigger stage. The exile's wound opened again, wider. Up in the clan's box, the crown itself was coming apart. The crown beast the clan parades stood beside the golden boy through all of it, and as my cast-off won on the sand, it strained, hard. Its great gold body leaned out over the box rail toward the stands, toward the rail where a hooded nobody stood not moving, and its ridge-crowned head swung and searched with a hunger the boy couldn't cover. The golden boy laid both hands on it, pressed close. Worked the bond harder than he ever had in his life, jaw tight, smile gone brittle, because the beast he wore like a crown was reaching past him towards someone in the crowd, and he could feel, in his hands, that it did not answer to him at all. He didn't know it was reaching for the man who made it. He only knew the ground under his whole life had shifted, and that the beast's pull got worse every time a junk beast rumor grew. His dread sharpened into something close to sickness. He held on and smiled and prayed no one else saw what he felt. I saw it. From the rail I watched the crown strain toward me, and I knew exactly what it was, and I said nothing and did nothing because it was not time. Not here, not on a stage they could wipe with a wet rag. I slipped out through the right exit while the board was still erasing me. I was drained. The fielding, the weeks of grow, the long-held stillness of the ring, all of it had emptied my well the way it always does, and my hands wouldn't fully close. When I looked down, there were 2 fresh scar lines across the left palm. I hadn't had that morning, pale over pale, laid in while I stood so still I hadn't felt them come. The right's exact price, counted and written into the one place I can't wash it off, but it wasn't the drain that sat worst on me. It was the chalk. Behind me, a clerk was wiping away the biggest proof of my life, and the crowd that had seen it would go home and be told, and half of them would believe the telling over their own eyes because believing the board is easier than believing the latter's a lie. I took it in silence. That's the discipline, and it cost me more than the drain did. A man who has been erased twice learns that the erasing doesn't hurt less the second time. It hurts exactly as much, and you carry it out through the exit with your face shut, because the alternative, shouting, breaking, showing them the fury, is the one thing that would hand them your name. I got clear of the ground and I stood in an alley off the market, and I let myself feel it for one slow breath, and then I put it away. They could strike the chalk, they could tell the crowd, it never happened. But they couldn't reach into the galleries and unsee what 1,000 people had seen with their own eyes, and they couldn't reach into me and take the one thing I'd walked in to get. I knew, now for certain, that my worst graded work beats their best bred crowns in the open. Twice proven, twice erased. And an erased truth is still a truth, it just costs more to carry. There is one stage they can't wipe with a rag. One arena the whole world watches at once, where the board doesn't get to chalk over what happens after everyone's gone home. I'd known it since the pit. I knew it harder now, standing drained in an alley with my second win already turning to nothing behind me. The Ascension grounds, where you can't strike a thing 1,000 clans see land. I would give them nothing more to erase until I stood on that sand. Let them bury the market wins. Let them tell the crowd it was a trick. Every erasure was just proof of how badly they needed it not to be true, and every one of them was one more thing I would answer, all at once, where they couldn't reach the chalk. 30 days to the Ascension Trials. The confirmation came the way erasures always come to me now, quietly, secondhand, from a boy selling parchment sheets outside the market gate. Right results, fresh chalk, he called. Yesterday's bouts, official record. I paid my copper and read it standing in the crowd, and there it was in a clerk's flat hand. No mention of a cast-off, no mention of a crowned prize turned in circles on the sand. The bout was marked, banned, results wiped, no contest on record, struck clean. The win I had felt land in me like a coal in a closed fist did not exist anymore, not on paper, not to the ladder that decides who gets to matter. Somewhere behind me a man was reading the same sheet and laughing. Nobody remembers his name, he told his friend. There's a reason. I folded the sheet once, small, and put it inside my cloak where the torn crest used to sit. My hands didn't shake. They'd stopped shaking at this a long time ago. What hadn't stopped was the wound underneath it, the same wound from the pit, from the branding, opened clean along the same old line. Prove it. Get erased. Prove it again. Get erased again. The pattern had a rhythm now, and rhythms are the worst kind of pain, because you can see the next beat coming before it lands. 2 clerks passed close enough for me to hear them arguing over whether the wipe was even fair. One of them thought the beast should have kept its result, no matter the tamer's standing. The other one laughed at him for saying it out loud near the posting board. Neither of them knew they were discussing a man standing 3 feet away with the folded proof of his own erasure pressed against his ribs. That's the strange mercy of being nobody. You get to stand inside your own funeral and hear the words said over you, argued about like gossip. 2 stalls down from the parchment boy, a bookmaker was chalking new odds onto a board of his own, crowned prizes against surprises, longer than they'd been a week before. A bettor grumbled about it to no one in particular. Cost me twice this month already, taking crowns for granted. The bookmaker didn't care whose beast had done it. He only cared that the market had started pricing in the chance, real numbers on a real board, in a place the clan's chalk couldn't reach. Nobody there knew my name, but the ladder itself had just moved half an inch because of something I'd grown in the dark. I let myself feel that much before I put it away. I walked back to the hatch yard with the folded sheet against my ribs like a second scar. Sable met me at the gate the way she always does, low to the ground, copper eyes tracking my face before my feet. She knew before I said a word, she always does. I sat down hard against the fence post and she pressed her whole small weight into my side, and for one long minute I let myself want something ugly and simple. I wanted to walk to the Eyrie tonight, right now. Walk up the clan steps past whatever guard stood there, drop the molt signature proof I'd gathered in secret for months on the nearest table, and say it out loud for anyone to hear, that crown you show off is mine. I grew it from a dying runt before you threw me out, and I can prove every inch of it. It would feel like justice, for about an hour. Then the board would wipe it just like they wiped the right, because I'd have no galleries, no crowd, no stage. They couldn't clean with a rag, just one exile's word in a hallway, and a clan with every reason to bury it before dawn. Not there, the old keeper said. He'd come up quiet, the way pit men learn to, and he crouched by the fence with his bad knee cracking. Not tonight. You go up those steps alone, you hand them everything and get nothing back. I know. You don't look like you know. You look like a man about to do something dumb because dumb feels better than waiting. It would feel like something, I said. Right now anything would feel better than this. I've watched 40 years of somethings feel better for an afternoon and cost a man everything he had left. You want to march up there and hand them the whole story before you've got solid ground under it that can't be pulled away. That's not brave. That's just grief wearing Brave's coat. I didn't have an answer for that because it was true, and truth doesn't need an answer, only room to sit. Sable pushed harder into my ribs, like she'd understood him too, and maybe she had. I sat there with the 2 of them pinning me down on both sides, a weight I hadn't asked for and needed anyway, and I let the want burn down instead of out. That was the shape of it, not fixed. Just held. I had proof now. Real proof, the molt signature, the shape of the branch, the dates that lined up with the runt going missing from the record, the same season the golden boy was crowned. I had a right win too, even if the chalk called it void. 1,000 market eyes had seen it happen, and eyes don't unsee. 2 threads, both real, both mine, and I chose not to pull either one. Not tonight. The Ascension Trials are the one stage where the board can't send a clerk to wipe the chalk before the crowd goes home. Every clan on the ladder watches it once. Whatever happens there happens in front of all of them, together. And there's no version of the clan leader's machine fast enough to erase a thing 1,000 people saw with their own eyes on the biggest floor in the world. If I walked up those steps tonight, I'd spend everything I had on a private fight that would end at a locked door. If I held it, saved it, carried it those last weeks to the trials, I'd spend it once, out in the open, where it could never be wiped again. I chose the arena. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like biting down on something and choosing not to scream, because screaming now would waste the only weapon I had left that they couldn't take from me. Holding back isn't the same as having no power. Sometimes it's the whole shape of it. Not yet, I said, mostly to myself, and Sable's ear flicked at the sound like she was filing it away too. That same night, back among the pens with the lamp turned low, the board got its answer, the kind it would never see. The sour-scaled larva I'd nursed through 2 cold nights a season back had been creeping toward a branch its line was never supposed to reach, a light armored stride no beast of its make should have. I was too spent to grow anything new. There was no rewind left in me that night, only watching, and I watched it get there on its own. A slow-plated shutter ran the length of it, the plates lifting and settling a new way, and then it put weight on a foot it had never been able to trust, and the weight held. Molt 2, on a branch its line was denied, on a night the boar thinks I lost. Sable pushed in against my knee, copper eyes on the same thing mine were. 2, I said, low, counting it out. The second of my hidden 3, crossed clean. They'd wiped 1 win in the open that afternoon. Here were 2 they couldn't reach, and this one had cost them nothing but the certainty of their own record. But holding a thing that badly wants out costs something, and the cost wasn't only in my hands. Under the discipline I just found, something older and uglier stirred. A voice that sounded too much like the ranking board's own, the one that had graded me F rank and meant it to last a lifetime. It said I was only saving this reveal because some unhealed part of me still needed the roar of a crowd to prove what I already knew was true. Need and want, pulling opposite ways in the same chest, to be whole no matter what any board said, and to be seen, plain as day, by everyone who ever laughed. I didn't settle it that night. I only noticed how wide the crack had gotten, and kept walking anyway with both halves of me still arguing. I thought about the F rank grading a lot that week, more than I had in months. I could still recite the exact words the ranking clerk used the day they scored my talent, flat and final, like reading a weight off a scale, not enough bond in him, no use beyond handling discards, rank effectively null. I'd built a whole second life proving that sentence wrong in the dark, one cast off at a time, and some nights that felt like enough. Other nights, like this one, it felt like I was still writing arguments against a grade nobody but me remembered giving. That's its own kind of cage. You can walk free of the people who caged you and still spend years arguing with their voice in your own head. The old keeper came by the yard 2 mornings later with a fresh cast-off over one shoulder, and he stopped short at the fence, staring at the lanky molt 2 I'd grown the week before. It had found its eggline branch overnight, nothing big, just a shudder along its new ridge, and then, for the first time, a full weightless stride across the packed dirt, silent, sure-footed, done. The old keeper let out a breath like he'd been holding it for years. That's a beast standing on its own 2 feet that had none a month back, he said, low, and reached out to steady it anyway, the way you do even when a thing doesn't need it. Then he did something I'd never seen him do. He counted them off on his fingers, slow, his voice dropping lower with each one. Sable, the sour-scaled one, and now this lanky stridefinder. 3 standing that the board buried, he said, and not one of them knows it's supposed to be impossible. 40 years he'd thrown runts on the discard pile because the board said they were done, and watched every one of them stay down. 3 of them were on their feet now, in his lifetime, where he could count them. It wasn't the trials. It wasn't proof anyone else would ever see. But it was real, measured, small, and it was his to witness before it was anyone else's. The clans machine, meanwhile, wasn't sitting still either. Word came down from the assembly hall 2 days later, posted on the same boards that carry right results and grain prices. No talent without formal blessing from a recognized clan bloodline would be allowed to field a beast at the coming Ascension Trials. Unblessed talents barred. The wording was careful, dry, aimed at nothing in particular and everything at once, but I read it and knew exactly whose hand had shaped it. Keep him away from the parade, the clan leader was overheard telling an assembly clerk, close enough to the posting board that half the market caught it. Keep him far. She still didn't know she meant me. That was the joke buried under the whole notice, sharp enough to cut both ways. The gate she was building to keep out unblessed tricksters and market frauds was aimed, without her knowing, right at the man whose work she had already crowned and paraded under her own family's colors. She thought she was protecting the order. She was fencing herself in against the truth she'd stolen. The rival scout's report on the Void Rite reached the rival clan's post that same week, and I heard how it read before I ever saw it. The old keeper has ears in 3 markets and a mouth that doesn't waste them. She hadn't lied outright, she wasn't built for that. But she'd shaped it soft, an unknown Tamer with an odd method, worth watching, no confirmed name, no push for the wardens to step in. Every line in it protected a man she'd never met while still claiming the credit for finding him first. I won't hand him to the wardens, she told her own boss, flat when he pushed for a name she didn't have. Not yet. Not yet. The same 2 words I'd used at the fence post, and neither of us knowing the other had used them. I asked her once, later, through the old keeper's relay, why she'd chosen to shield a man she'd never said a word to. His answer came back second-hand and clipped, the way messages do when they pass through someone who doesn't want to get caught carrying them, she said. The latter had never once explained why strength should only be allowed to move one direction. I didn't know, reading that, whether I'd found an ally or just a woman as tired of the board's certainties as I was. Either way, her hand was on the scale now, and it was tipping toward me. The old keeper paid for his patience, the plain way patience gets paid in the pit, with risk to the one thing he had left to lose. Eyes on the pit sharpened after the Void Rite. Clan agents came sniffing for the source of unblessed right fraud, and a man his age with a soft spot for runts made an easy target for anyone looking to close a career quietly. He moved the larvae twice in 3 days, once hidden under a false load of feed sacks, once by walking them out himself in a barrow with a tarp over the top, whistling like a man with nothing to hide. 40 years I've thrown good beasts on the discard pile because the board told me they were done, he said, low, handing me a fresh clutch through the fence in the dark. I'm not losing my post over the one thing I finally did right. I didn't have words big enough for that, so I didn't try. I took the clutch and let my hand rest a second longer than it needed to on his. The parade came 3 nights later, unplanned. One of the clan leaders' morale shows for a clan still nervous about market rumors of a nameless tamer beating crowns with garbage. Their star tamer walked the crown beast down the processional in full dress, gold bronze scale catching torchlight, red crest frills swept back like a banner. Nobody in that crowd called it by any name I'd have known as mine to hear yet. I watched from the market edge, hooded, close enough to see what the crowd couldn't. The parade moved slow and careful, built for show rather than speed. Torchbearers first, then a line of junior clan tamers with lesser beasts, then their star tamer and the crown beast at the center where every eye was meant to land, and did. Children on their father's shoulders pointed and shouted the crown beast's name like a cheer, and somewhere behind me a merchant was already selling small carved copies of it, gold-painted wood no bigger than a thumb. I watched people spend coin on a shape of my own work, and felt nothing as simple as anger. It was closer to dizziness, the feeling of standing at the edge of a story so widely believed that even I, holding the truth of it in my own scarred hands, had to remind myself which version was real. Halfway down the route, the beast's stride broke. Just for a step. A hitch. A swing of that ridge-crowned head toward the crowd's edge, toward nothing anyone else could point to, a restlessness that looked for one instant like the animal was about to drop the whole show and go somewhere else entirely. Their star tamer's hand tightened hard on its lead. He caught it, laughed something to the nearest clan elder about high spirits, and the parade rolled on like nothing had happened. But I saw the clan leader's face in that half-second. I'd learned to read it across 3 sightings now, and this was the widest the crack had ever gone. Not fear yet, not knowing, just a flicker of something she couldn't name, landing wrong behind her eyes, gone as fast as it came. She didn't know what she'd seen. She only knew, the way you know a floorboard has started to give before you fall through it, that something in her certainty had shifted weight. It wasn't realization. I want to be clear with myself about that because hoping for more than was really there is its own kind of trap. It was a crack, not a break. She'd bury it by mourning under duty and denial, the way she buried everything that threatened the order she ran. But it had happened in front of witnesses, and cracks that happen in front of witnesses don't fully close again. I walked back to the hatch yard that night with the barred gate notice folded next to the struck right sheet, 2 pieces of paper telling me the same thing from 2 sides. The door they were building said no room for what I was, and the only branch I'd grown so far, strong as it wasn't going to be undeniable enough to walk through it anyway. Multi 3 had beaten a crowned prize on an open floor and the board had erased it in an afternoon. Mult 3 would not be enough to survive a barred gate at the Ascension Trials, where every excuse they needed to shut me out would already be sitting in the rulebook, waiting. I needed something the rulebook had no words for. Something that didn't just beat a crown, something that made the very idea of denying it look absurd in front of the whole ladder at once. I thought, standing there, of every dead-ended beast I'd walked past in the old keeper's bins over the months, the ones I hadn't chosen yet, still waiting in the discard rows for a branch to be grown into them. Somewhere in that pile of things the world had already given up on was an answer big enough to walk through a barred gate. I just hadn't found it yet, and I had 20 days left to. Sable curled against my leg in the dark of the hatch yard, molt blue veins pulsing faint under her coat, and I looked past her at the rest of the menagerie, cast-offs and rejects, every one of them proof of the same quiet law, every one of them still a rung below what the gate would demand. 20 days, I'd have to push further than I ever had. Further than any branch I dared try since the day I learned what regress really costs. An apex no board, no barred gate, no clerk with a piece of chalk could call a trick. Molt 4. I picked the beast for it 3 days before I tried it, and I picked wrong the first time on purpose, just to be sure I understood the branch before I bet everything on it. The pick was a heavy-boned cast-off. The old keeper had smuggled out under the feed sacks, dead-ended twice already, thrown out by 2 separate clans before it ever reached the pit. A creature every board that ever looked at it had told its whole tree was closed. That's exactly the kind of dead-end regress needs. Not a beast with options left. A beast with none, so nothing I do is stolen from a life it might have had. I laid my palms against it at dusk in the hatchyard, alone except for Sable watching from the fence rail with her ears flat. The way she gets when she knows what's coming costs me something she can't help with. Molt 4 isn't a rung anyone lists. Every clan tamer I'd ever heard of stopped their reach at 3, because 3 is where the boards know a shape, and 4 is where the shape stops having a name. I wasn't reaching for a known branch. I was reaching past the edge of every chart the ranking board had ever drawn, into ground nobody had bothered to map because nobody sane tries to walk there. The rewind went down easy enough. Eggward is always the easy half. It's the re-raise that costs, and this re-raise cost more than any I'd done. I felt it pull from somewhere under the strength I usually spent, a deeper well I hadn't drawn from since the very first rewind that made Sable. My hands went cold at the wrist. My sight narrowed to a tunnel with the beast at the far end of it. Somewhere past the halfway point of the growing, I understood, faintly, that I was pushing toward a line I'd never been told existed and only half believed in, the line between an apex form and whatever the world calls a beast that shouldn't be regrown at all. 2 hours in, my legs went out from under me and I sat down hard in the dirt without deciding to. Sable pushed against my back to keep me upright, small as she is, and I remember laughing once, short and cracked, at the idea that it took a beast that small, a mudcur runt, to hold her tamer up. I kept my palms on it anyway. Stopping halfway through a re-race this deep would have wasted every hour already spent and left the beast worse off than the discard pile had. Half a branch is crueler than no branch at all, so I stayed down on my knees and finished it. The branch caught. The beast rose out of its last molt, taller than anything I'd raised before, plated where the old form had been soft, a low true molt hum coming off its hide that I felt in my teeth before I heard it in my ears. And then it rang. There's no better word for it. A tremor moved out from the beast like a bell struck once, silent to normal ears but loud in whatever sense tamers and talents share under the surface of the world, a note that said, plain as anything, something has crossed a line that was drawn for a reason. I felt my own knees buckle in the aftershock of it, Sable's whole body going stiff against my shin, and for one long breath the hatchyard held so still I could hear my own blood. That wasn't supposed to happen, I said out loud, to no one, because saying it made it smaller. It didn't get smaller. I sat with the new beast through the rest of that night, watching the low hum in its hide settle into something quieter, and I thought about the stories every clan child grows up hearing at the edge of a fire. Half warning, half legend, about tamers who chased the true molt line too hard and woke something on the far side of it that the world had spent lifetimes making sure stayed asleep. I'd always filed those stories next to the ones about ghosts in the granary, good for scaring children into caution and nothing more. Sitting there with my hands still cold and a beast humming low beside me, I wasn't so sure anymore which parts of the old fireside warnings were legend, and which parts were just history nobody wanted to call by its real name. 3 days later, word moved through the market the way real danger moves, fast, low, mouth to mouth without ever touching a public board. The Warden Assembly had joined the hunt, not the ranking board. Not the clan's agents. A body above all of them, the ones whose job is hunting down rewinders who push past the cap the world had built to keep something old and hungry from waking. The first line, the true molt threshold every clan child is warned about before they're old enough to understand why. The wardens outlawed that for a reason, I heard a stall keeper say, low and scared, to a customer who hadn't asked, where is he? The fear in her voice wasn't an act. The market had grown up on stories about the cap for a reason nobody bothered explaining to children beyond, don't cross it, and here was proof, however faint and far off, that someone lately had. I kept my hood low through the rest of that market walk, and felt, for the first time since the branding, truly hunted rather than just erased. Erasure, I understood. This was something colder. They didn't have my name. They had my signature, the ringing rewind, traceable if you know how to read it, and wardens know exactly how to read it. I moved the menagerie that same night, every cast-off and every fragile fresh-molted beast packed into crates and carried through the market's back alleys under cover of a delivery run. The old keeper set up on an hour's notice. Sable rode against my chest the whole way, silent, her copper eyes tracking every shadow the way mine were. We nearly didn't make it clear. The alleys behind the market run narrow and crooked, built centuries ago for foot traffic and never widened, which usually works in my favor. A hooded man with a crate draws less notice in a maze than he would on an open road. That night, the maze felt like a trap instead of a shelter. Every turn put us closer to a checkpoint or further from the one gap the old keeper had scouted an hour before, and twice I had to backtrack whole blocks with Sable's small weight stiff against my chest, both of us listening for boots on stone. A pair of gray-cloaked wardens stood at the mouth of the alley I needed, checking crates with a patience that told me they weren't guessing, they were following something exact. I froze in the dark behind a stack of barrels with a crate of half-molted beasts in my arms, and no second way out. The old keeper walked straight up to them. Feed run, he said, loud, easy, exactly the voice of a man who has nothing to hide because he spent 40 years being invisible on purpose. Pit's short on grain, I'm hauling it myself before the good stuff spoils. They asked him 3 questions. He answered all 3 wrong on purpose, rambling, an old man's harmless confusion, and by the time they decided he wasn't worth their patience, I was 2 streets clear with the crate still in my arms, and my heart going harder than the rewind had left it. 3 turns backtracked through that maze, boots twice within earshot, and Sable never once made a sound. The steadiest thing I owned, on a night when a single noise was worth everything I'd built. I didn't thank him properly that night, there wasn't time. I've thought about it since. An old man risking a lifetime post on 3 wrong answers to a pair of trained hunters because a fence-line friendship had turned, somewhere along the way, into something closer to family. I don't use that word lightly. I hadn't had much reason to before the old keeper. We got the menagerie to a second, better hidden yard on the far edge of the market by dawn, and I sat against a crate afterward with my hands shaking from something that wasn't cold this time. Sable climbed into my lap, all four legs folded small, and stayed there until the shaking stopped. The qualifier for the trials ran 2 days after that, a ranked floor open to any tamer willing to prove a beast on the record before the trials proper. I walked my new apex onto that sand with no name on it and no right record anywhere that could describe what it was, because there was no box for it to fall into. The judges scratched their tally boards, argued in low voices at the rail, and let the bout run, because disqualifying a beast for being unrecognizable wasn't a rule anyone had thought to write. The first opponent was a mid-clan's rising prize, fast and sure, the kind of beast that usually wins qualifiers on reputation before the bout even starts. My apex met its opening rush and simply soaked it up, weight and force finding nowhere useful to land, and the crowd's murmur turned from curious to uneasy in the space of one exchange. One exchange was the whole of it. A rising prize had spent its entire opening on air, and there was nothing left in it after. A ranked tamer at the rail said the count out loud, flat and disbelieving, one exchange. And the number moved down the tiers the way bad news moves, until the murmur around me stopped being curious and started being afraid. The second opponent tried patience instead of speed, circling, waiting for an opening that never widened. There wasn't one to find. The branch I'd grown had no seams for a patient beast to work into, no weakness carried over from whatever discarded shape it used to wear. It didn't just win. It walked through 3 ranked opponents without taking a mark that mattered, moving with a control that had nothing to do with command and everything to do with a branch grown clean and true, down to the root. No record holds a branch like that, someone in the qualifier gallery said, and it wasn't mockery this time, it was closer to fear. I qualified, quietly, with no name, exactly the way I needed to. The gate the clan leader had barred against unblessed talents had no words for a beast that fit no box at all, and I'd slipped through the one seam her wording left open. Walking off that sand, I let myself feel the win for exactly as long as it took to cross the qualifier gate, and then I put it away the same way I'd put away every win before it, folded small, filed under things the world hadn't been allowed to wipe yet. Sable met me at the gate rail with her ears up for once instead of flat, and I crouched and let her butt her head against my chin, the way she does when she's decided a thing has gone well enough to celebrate in her own small way. It was the closest either of us came to a real celebration that whole week. There wasn't room for more than that, with the warden still somewhere behind us and the trials 3 days off. Up in the clan's heights that same week, the Golden Boy was coming apart in private, the way I imagine anyone comes apart when the ground under a stolen life finally starts moving for good. The old keeper's ears caught the shape of it second-hand, from a servant who owed him a favor. The crown beast had grown harder to hold, its answers to the Golden Boy's commands, slower, more sullen, as though the animal itself felt the trials closing in and had started to forget why it should pretend. The Golden Boy had taken to practicing alone at dawn, away from witnesses, because the beast's failures in front of a crowd had gotten too frequent to explain away his high spirits. He dreaded the trials. He didn't know why exactly, only that something in him flinched every time someone said the date, the way a man flinches from a door he knows is about to open on something he can't survive. There was a version of me that could have felt something like pity for that, and some nights I did. The Golden Boy hadn't chosen to be handed a stolen crown any more than I'd chosen to have my work stolen out from under me. He'd been a boy offered glory by an aunt he trusted, and he'd taken it the way any 18-year-old offered glory takes it, without asking too many questions about where it came from. That didn't make the theft smaller. It just meant the reckoning coming for him wasn't going to be simple, and I found I didn't much want it to be. I wanted the truth out. I didn't need him broken to get it. The rival scout found me the night before I left for the grounds. Not by accident. She'd been closing on my trail for months, and she'd finally closed it all the way. She knew my face, my name, the whole shape of what I was, before I ever told her a word of it. She could have ended everything right there. One report to the wardens with my name on it instead of unknown tamer, method unconfirmed, and the hunt already circling would have landed on me before I ever reached the trial's floor. She stood at the mouth of the alley instead, hood down, hands empty, and looked at me the way you look at something you've spent a long time deciding what to do with. "Go," she said. "I never saw you." That was all. No demand, no price named out loud, though I understood the cost she was paying without her saying it. A scout who could have made her career handing the wardens their target instead chose to hand me 3 more days of freedom on nothing but a read of my face across a market and a folder full of scars she'd catalogued out of a stubbornness that had somehow tipped, at the last second, toward the truth instead of the report. Why? I asked. It was the only word I had room for. "Because I've spent 4 months building a case against a man who never hurt anyone," she said. "Every scrap of proof I gathered says the same thing. You take what's already broken and you make it whole. That's not the crime the wardens think it is. I'm not going to be the one who hands them a reason to treat it like one before the world's even had a chance to see it plain." She looked past me, toward the road, toward the grounds 3 days off. "Prove it there. Prove it loud enough that nobody gets to decide quietly what happens to you after." I didn't thank her either. I nodded once and walked. The road to the grounds runs 3 days from the market, wide enough for a whole clan's procession, and I walked it with a menagerie of the world's thrown-away things at my back, and the wardens somewhere behind me in the dark, close enough that I never stopped feeling their weight on my neck the whole way. Sable walked beside me instead of riding, her small shape steady against the dust, molten blue veins catching what little light came through the clouds. Everything I'd built in 9 months of hiding was converging on one arena 3 days ahead, and every clan that had ever laughed at a beast butcher would be sitting in its galleries when I arrived. I passed other travelers on that road heading the same way. Clan retinues with banners flying, merchants hauling wagons of goods to sell to a trials crowd, a scattering of hopeful, unaffiliated tamers like me walking beside beasts they'd raised on hope and little else. None of them looked twice at a hooded man with a small dark companion and a train of plain cast-offs behind him. I'd spent 9 months building toward the exact moment that being unknown would stop protecting me, and here on the last stretch of road before it happened, I found myself almost sorry to let it go. Being invisible had been a cage in some ways and a shelter in others, and I wasn't sure yet what would be left of the second version of myself once the first one burned away in front of 10,000 strangers. The grounds came into sight on the evening of the second day, banners lit gold and red against a darkening sky, more clans gathered under one roof than I'd ever stood near in my life. Somewhere inside those walls, the crowned beast was already being groomed for a final show, the golden boy already rehearsing whatever words his aunt had written for him to say. I walked the last mile in the dark with my menagerie close around me and Sable's small weight leaning into my leg every few steps, and I let myself think, just once, all the way through to the end of what tomorrow might really look like. Then I put the thought away too, the way I'd learned to put everything away until it was time, and kept walking. 3 days to the Ascension Trials. The grounds swallow sound differently than any pit or right floor I'd ever stood in. 10,000 voices layered into one long weather of noise, galleries stacked so high the top tier looked like a smear of faces against the sky, and I walked into the middle of it with my hood down for the first time in 9 months, because a nobody who wins here doesn't need a hood. A nobody who wins here is about to stop being a nobody, whether he wants it or not. Nobody stopped me at the gate. My menagerie carried no clan banner, no sponsor's crest, nothing the registrars had a box to check, so they waved me through the way they wave through every unaffiliated entrant too small to matter. I felt the old satisfaction in that, invisible right up until the moment being invisible stopped being useful. Across the grounds, on the clan's dais, the parade was already underway. Oryx. That was the first time I heard the names spoken out loud, called out by a herald in clan crimson, as the beast came down the ramp in full ceremonial plate, gold bronze scale, deep red crest frills, a ridge-crowned head that swept the crowd like it was searching for something and hadn't found it yet. The golden boy walked at its shoulder in his best clan dress, smiling the smile of a boy who'd learned to perform ownership so well he'd nearly convinced himself it was real. I had grown that animal from a dying runt in the dark, alone, before they threw me out. 9 months of silence, and here it was, being crowned in front of the whole world under someone else's name. I let myself look at it fully, for the first time in daylight, instead of through market crowds and parade gaps. It was larger than I remembered from the last time I'd laid hands on it, the plating along its ridge grown thicker, the crest frills wider, a body that had kept growing in the months since I'd lost the right to watch it grow. Some part of me, watching it from across that vast floor, felt something closer to a parent's ache than a thief's grievance. I hadn't lost a possession. I'd lost the chance to see a thing I'd built keep becoming itself. Every thread I'd been carrying met on this floor at once, the struck right, the barred gate, the warden hunt somewhere behind me, the crowned beast straining toward me across a parade the way it always had and never been allowed to explain. The countdown that had ticked in my chest for 90 days went silent the second the opening horn sounded. There was no more waiting left to do, only the floor. The first rounds ran fast, ranked bout after ranked bout, clan prizes fielded against a field of hopefuls nobody expected to survive the morning. I fielded my castoffs one at a time, and one at a time they didn't just survive. They swept. A lanky molt. 3 against a clan's third-string prize, over in 4 exchanges. A heavier apex against a second clan's pride, longer, harder but the same ending, 7 exchanges, and the crowned animal turning in circles on the sand while the beast, the boards had once marked ruined, stood over it, untouched. The third didn't reach me at all, it balked before the first exchange and never found a line to take. Round after round, the pattern repeated until the crowd stopped being surprised and started being afraid of being surprised again. The count came back at me from the mid-tiers between bouts, 4, then 7, then none, some voice adding it up out loud and landing on the same word every time. How? I stayed at the rail between bouts, hood down now, letting whoever wanted to look at my face look. There was no point hiding anymore. Every round that ended with another crowned prize turning circles on the sand was another brick pulled out from under the wall I'd hidden behind for 9 months, and I'd chosen, walking in that morning, to let the whole wall come down rather than try to save pieces of it. Sable stayed close against my leg the whole time, unbothered by the noise, watching each bout the way she always does, Not for who won, I think, but for me, checking in the space between rounds to see how I was carrying it. A clan elder 2 tiers up leaned over the rail toward his neighbor, loud enough that I caught it clean. Whoever trained that line, he said, trained it wrong on purpose. No natural branch grows like that. His neighbor didn't answer. Nobody had a natural explanation to offer, and the ones without an explanation were the ones growing afraid fastest. That beast beat a crowned prize, someone shouted from the mid-tiers, disbelieving. How? Nobody could answer him. That was the whole design, finally paying out in the open, on a floor no clerk could reach with a piece of chalk. By the third round, the murmur had turned into something closer to dread. A ranking official near the assembly box said it loud enough for 3 tiers to hear him. If that's real, he said, everything we crown is a lie. I heard the sentence land the way I imagine a struck bell keeps ringing after the hand pulls back. It wasn't mockery. It wasn't wonder either, not fully. It was fear, dressed up as disbelief. The exact fear the whole ranking ladder had been built to keep anyone from ever having to feel. Somewhere in the box kept for the rival clan's watchers, I caught a glimpse of the rival scout standing very still, watching not the bouts but the reaction spreading through the tiers around her, cataloging it the way she'd cataloged every scrap of proof about me for months. She hadn't moved yet. I understood, watching her wait, that she was choosing her moment the same careful way I'd chosen mine. Then the cost came due, the way it always does, at the worst possible moment. One of my cast-offs, a young thing I'd pushed through its final molt only 11 days before, still deep inside the fragile window that every rewind opens and takes weeks to close, buckled mid-round. Not from the opponent's pressure. From its own newness, a stumble in its own regrown legs, a shudder running root to crest that told me exactly what was happening before I fully understood it myself. Push a beast through an apex branch days before a fight this hard, and the branch holds in theory and fails in practice the second real weight lands on it. Something's wrong with his beast, a voice carried from the nearest gallery, sharp with the kind of attention I didn't want yet. I had a choice, and it wasn't a comfortable one. Pull the beast from the sweep, protect it, protect myself, and let the round go to forfeit, safe, costless, and a hole punched straight through the momentum I'd spent 9 months building. Or, reach across the sand with everything left in my own well and steady it myself, on the spot, in front of every eye in the grounds. I reached. It isn't like the rewind itself. There's no branch to choose, no molt to guide. Just raw strength poured out through my palms into a creature that needs steadying, no different in kind from what a rewind costs, only faster and rawer and without the mercy of privacy. My knees hit the sand. My sight narrowed the way it had the night molt 4 rang out, except this time there was no dark hatchyard to fall quietly inside of. This time 10,000 people watched a hooded stranger go white and shaking on his knees in the middle of the ascension floor, both hands pressed to a beast that shouldn't have needed him at all if the world worked the way it claimed to. The beast steadied, stood, finished the round on legs that held. I stayed on my knees a moment longer than I needed to, because my body wasn't finished telling me what it had cost. I promised myself, months ago in words I'd never said out loud to anyone but me, that it isn't instant, that every rewind burns something real. Here was the proof of it, kneeling in the sand in front of the whole ladder at the exact moment the ladder was learning my name. The sweep wasn't a free win, it never had been. I got up, I had to. My hands were shaking hard enough by then that I had to press them flat against my thighs to still them, and the taste in my mouth was the same copper taste I'd carried out of the hatchyard. The night molt 4 rang out. The body's own alarm telling me I'd spent past a line it wanted respected. I ignored it, the way I've learned to ignore it every time the other choice is worse. Sable pressed against my shin, steady, an anchor small enough to overlook and strong enough to matter, and I used her weight the way I'd used the old keeper's hands at the fence post weeks before, something solid to stand back up inside of. Across the arena, on the clan's dais, Oryx had stopped moving entirely. The beast's great gold head had turned, slow, deliberate, ignoring the herald beside it, and the crowd below it, and the golden boy's hand tightening hard on its lead, and fixed on the kneeling shape at the center of the sand. Its whole body leaned that way, straining against the lead the way it had strained at every parade for months, except this time there was no ceremony to hide behind, and no easy laugh to cover it. It wasn't performing recognition. It was recognition, plain and total, the animal reaching for the hands that had made it whole with an urgency it had never once shown for the boy who claimed to own it. The golden boy pulled the lead. The beast didn't answer him at all. High in the galleries, the rival scout stood and lifted her own folder above her head, papers she'd carried through months of careful, patient, dangerous work. "Trace the crowned beast," she called out, her voice carrying clean over the crowd noise the way a trained scout's voice is built to, and the whole clan falls. She read it out loud, right there, before the assembly box could stop her. The molt signature, the same faint blue vein glow that ran under Oryx's crest and under the small black beast standing loyal at the center of the sand. The dates that put a dying runt's disappearance from clan record on the exact day the golden boy was first crowned its tamer. She'd built the case in silence for months, protecting me with soft reports the whole time, and she spent it now all at once on the one floor where it couldn't be wiped. An assembly clerk near the dais tried to shout her down, called for order, called the claim out of order and unproven. Nobody in the galleries was listening to him anymore. The rival scout held her folder open at arm's length for anyone close enough to read it, and the same molten blue mark I'd carried on my own hands for 9 months sat there on paper for the whole ladder to compare against the animal standing not 30 feet from where I knelt. The grounds went past silence into something with weight to it. Orax broke the lead. Not violently. There was no fight in it, no harm, just a great gold animal stepping past a boy who had never truly held it, and crossing the sand toward the kneeling stranger with a sureness that needed no command to move it. It came to a stop in front of me, ridge-crowned head lowering until it was level with mine, and I put my scarred hand against its jaw the way I had the very first time, in the dark, before any of this began. The crown beast the clan worshipped turned its whole body toward the exiled beast butcher, in front of every clan that had ever laughed, and the trace landed clean. The pride of the clan had always been mine. Trace the crown beast, the galleries were saying now, all of them, the words moving tier to tier like fire finding dry grass, and the whole clan falls. I stood there with my hand on Orex's jaw, and 9 months of silence finally speaking for itself, and up in the clan's box, Sabrine's face did something I had waited a long, long time to see. It broke, not the flicker from the parade, not the crack from the procession. All of it, at once, in front of the assembly and every clan bloodline she had ever ruled, the certainty that had let her wipe 2 of my wins without a second thought, the calm that had let her brand a boy a butcher and call it protecting the order, all of it giving way at the same moment because there was no story left to tell that survived the sight of that beast crossing the sand on its own. She had built her whole authority on being right about what deserved to be crowned. She was watching, in real time, in front of everyone she governed, the exact proof that she'd been wrong from the start, and had known enough to fear it, and had buried a boy alive to keep from having to look at it. Beside her, the golden boy had gone the color of old ash. The crown he'd worn for 9 months, worn well, worn convincingly, worn all the way to the edge of his own quiet collapse, had simply stopped answering to him, out in the open, in the one place a clan prodigy can't afford to be seen holding an empty lead. He didn't reach for it again. He knew, the way the whole grounds now knew, that it had never truly been his to hold. I watched him a moment longer than I needed to, because there was something in his face I knew from my own, years back. The particular blankness of a person watching the story they'd built their whole identity around collapse in real time, with no version of themselves left standing on the other side that they recognized. I'd worn that same blankness the day they branded me. I didn't feel triumph looking at it on him. I felt the strange, unwanted kinship of 2 people who'd both been shaped by the same clan machine into roles neither of them had actually chosen. His, the golden lie, mine, the discarded truth. Neither of us had built the story. We'd only ever been living inside it. He didn't look at me. I don't think he could yet. Some collapses need privacy even when they happen in front of 10,000 people, and I gave him what little of that I could by turning my attention back to the beast in front of me instead of watching him fold. The crowd's verdict turned the way a tide turns. Slow at first, then all at once, 10,000 voices reorganizing around a single fact none of them could unknow. If he can regrow the discarded, someone shouted, and it carried, tier after tier picking it up, none of us are safe on the board. They weren't wrong to be afraid. Everything they had built their world on, that strength was bred, that ranking was destiny, that a beast graded ruined stayed ruined forever, had just been proven false on the biggest floor they owned. I stood in the middle of that fear with my hand still on the jaw of a beast that had chosen me twice, once in secret and once in front of the world, and felt 9 months of erasure finally refuse to stay erased. Somewhere above the noise, assembly officials were already arguing over procedure, whether a claim shouted from the galleries could stand as evidence, whether the Molt's signature record needed formal checking before any ruling could be entered, whether the whole day's results were now in question. I let their argument wash past me without reaching for it. Procedure would take weeks to catch up to what 10,000 pairs of eyes had already seen and believed. That gap between what the record would eventually say and what the crowd already knew was the whole reason I'd chosen this floor in the first place. My legs were still unsteady under me, the cost of the day sitting deep in my chest the way it always does after I spend past what I can comfortably afford. I didn't let it show more than I could help. Understatement is the only armor I own, and even here, even now, with the truth finally standing in the open where nobody could bury it again, I found I still wanted to wear it a little longer. The chalk couldn't reach this. Nobody's chalk ever would again. Nobody moved to stop me when I finally spoke, so I spoke. My name is Marek. The grounds had gone quiet enough that my voice didn't need to carry. My hand stayed on Rx's jaw. I was graded F rank, branded a beast butcher, and cast out of my own clan for it. And this beast. I felt it lean into my palm. I regressed from a dying runt before they ever threw me out. Everything my clan has crowned for the better part of a year was mine before it was ever theirs. It's called regress. It takes what the board already called finished, worthless, done, and gives it a second branch to grow down. 10,000 people had watched me erased twice before this morning. None of them would get to unhear this. Sabrine didn't try to speak over me. There was nothing left for her to strike. Later, away from the galleries, she found me at the edge of the sand. I told myself I was protecting the clan, she said, not meeting my eyes. I never once asked what protecting it was costing someone else. No, I said. You didn't. She let me go without asking for more. The assembly dais took longer to fall, the way institutions always do. I didn't stay to watch it play out. The first crack was already spreading too far to close. The old keeper found me once the crowd noise thinned. He put both hands on my shoulders. One, he said, rough. Just one, I lived to see it. I told him he'd have a place at the hatch yard for as long as he wanted one. He waved it off, the way he waves off anything sentimental, and turned to watch the crowd instead of me. The rival scout found me not long after, her folder spent under one arm. I told you I wanted your name, she said. I didn't expect to like what I found under it. She'd answer for the month she sat on it and said she'd do it again if anyone asked. A gray-cloaked warden asked me plainly how far past the known rungs I'd pushed. I told him the truth. I hadn't known the line was there until I'd already crossed it. He didn't arrest me. He didn't clear me either. Something old, he said. Older than any bloodline. You're nowhere near it. But you touched the fence, and fences remember being touched. The crown beast peeled off toward open ground on the walk home, unclaimed, choosing its own distance the way I'd let Sable choose hers. I didn't try to lead it anywhere. Sable never looked up from my side. The pit at dawn 2 days later was quiet, the way it always is before the market wakes. The old keeper already up, moving slow on his bad knee, sorting the morning's discards into the same bins he'd sorted them into for 40 years, out of habit more than need, now that half the market knew his name beside mine. There was a runt in the last bin. Small, mottled, one leg folding wrong when it tried to stand, the kind of beast every board on a ladder would have called finished without a second look. No gallery, no clerk, no crowd waiting to turn my name into a legend or a threat. Just a thrown-away thing at the bottom of a bin at first light, and me, kneeling down in front of it the way I had in front of the very first one, before any of this had a shape. I didn't do it to prove anything this time. That was the difference, and it was the only one that mattered. My worth didn't need the board's verdict anymore. 9 months hiding, 2 struck wins, hands scarred past healing, none of it free, and none of it less real for the ending coming out the way I wanted. Sable settled against my side the way she always does, small and warm and unbothered by the quiet, her molt blue veins catching the first thin light of morning in a slow, steady pulse under her coat. Whole. Chosen. Never once, in 9 months, commanded. I put my scarred hands around the runt in the bin, gentle, and felt the old familiar pull begin. Small this time, unhurried, no crowd waiting on the other end of it. And somewhere further out than any of that, past the cap I'd brushed without meaning to, past the low, unfinished note the warden had left hanging in the air behind me, something else was still waiting, unnamed, unresolved, a single ember banked low against whatever came next. I didn't go looking for it that morning. I had a run to raise. Behind me, the pit gate creaked open again. Another throwaway, another beginning.